First off, I want to talk about Speaker Mike Johnson. When you heard the news for the first time, was it almost a surreal experience? Because one, uh, he was the first one from Louisiana. Two, kind of a lesser known congressman.
I actually wasn't surprised. I know that he had been working it for about 3 weeks, and it kind of made sense to me. If you just look at Mike's skill sets, he had been chair of the largest caucus within the Republican House Conference. He had continued to have good relations across all the different groups, always doing his work, always showing up, always prepared with constructive ideas. And so when I heard he was working it, I kind of realized, well, this guy goes off, this guy goes off, this guy goes off, who's left? I wasn't surprised, but that's kind of an appraisal of how strong Mike is.
What are some of the qualities that really stick out to you when you think of him as a speaker?
Yeah, so the same thing that I think of when I think of him as a member of Congress. When I first took office, by the way, Jim McCrary, who held that seat before Mike, that congressional seat, said, Bill, keep your word, do your homework, show up, ask questions. You do those three things and you'll do your job. I don't know if he gave the same advice to Mike. I suspect he did, but Mike fits it to a T, meeting each of those. And so he's always out there advocating for conservative values, for making the point that needs to be made if we want to point out that which conservatives believe. It just built a reputation. And that reputation kind of served him well as folks started looking around saying who could be speaker.
Well, the work has already started for him. Right now, he's trying to discuss and meet with the White House today with Secretary of State Antony Blinken, trying to come to some sort of compromise when it comes to Israeli funding for their war against Hamas. He's asking for 14 billion to counter the president's 106 billion for the Israel war, but he's trying to counter it with IRS dollars, cutting the IRS to pay for that. You think that's a good move? Do you think that has any chance?
Well, a couple things. First, the president is asking for $106 billion for the border, Ukraine, Taiwan, domestic priorities, and Israel. And so the amount that the president wants and the amount that Johnson wants for Israel, about the same, about 14.6 billion. I think those numbers are exactly the same. Now the president doesn't want to pay for it. And Mike's like, well, we really should pay for it. So I like the fact that he is kind of saying, can we find the money someplace to do that? So I think the absolute dollars is the same, but the Biden administration doesn't want to pay. Mike does, and so I think that's going to be the rub. We have to see how it plays out.
Do you think it has a chance in the Senate whatsoever?
Right now, I'm told that Mitch McConnell wants to keep spending for the war in Israel linked with the funding for the border, funding for Taiwan, funding for Ukraine, and McConnell's point, and you always got to understand both points of view. McConnell's point is that Russia and Ukraine is linked with Iran, who is supporting Hamas and Israel. Both are linked to China, which is of course linked to Taiwan, and so there is a linkage between the war in Israel, Ukraine, and our activity in Taiwan. I would argue as well, we've got to take care of the southern border. We've got to take care of the southern border. That's our domestic issue, and there's 8 million people that have come across the border since Joe Biden became president. So the rationale to keep everything together, the 106 billion, is that which I just described. So I'm not quite sure where it lands, but that's why Mike Johnson has that job.
What would you like to see done? Would you advise Johnson to merge the funds together, or do you think they should keep them separate?
As a good speaker, he has to figure out where his conference is. It isn't Mike Johnson by himself. It's Mike Johnson, the leader of the House of Representatives. And in particular, the Republican members of the House of Representatives. So he's got to go back and have a conversation with his members, not get too far ahead of them, make sure that whatever he decides, he gets a majority of them to support, and kind of help educate McConnell. Leader McConnell, this is what I can get. I can't go any further than that. So that's part of the process of being a speaker, and I smile. That's why Mike Johnson will have a lot more gray hair in 1 year than he has right now.
want to get back to Speaker Johnson in just a little bit, but I know you've been to Israel lately. You talked with Prime Minister Netanyahu. Right now, the war just seems to be ramping up. What would you like to see done, and what are some concerns you have right now?
Well, Israel is committed to a months-long war to totally destroy Hamas. They point out that relative to the size of their population, when 1,300 Israelis are killed, that would have been equivalent to 30 to 40,000 Americans being killed. They say it is both our Pearl Harbor and our 9/11 combined. And the United States in no way was not going to go after the Japanese in World War II or after Al Qaeda after 9/11. Similarly, they are going to go after Hamas. We need to support Israel. Hamas beheaded children, raped women, killed grandmothers, if you will, elderly. They were there to kill Jews. They were there to kill Western values. They specifically went after a group of Israelis who had committed to peace with Gaza, teaching their children both Hebrew and Arabic. Hamas specifically went after them to kill them. Israel's decided they can no longer have Hamas on their border. I completely understand that. In the meantime, when I spoke to the Israelis, they asked that the United States support humanitarian aid for the Palestinians. They separate Hamas from the Palestinian people. And they said it's both for moral reasons and for strategic reasons. You can imagine if the humanitarian aid is going into the south of Gaza and everybody moves south to get food and water, that leaves the north open, and that's where Hamas is centered. The Israelis want to destroy Hamas, and we should support them.
I know you have to go pretty soon. Just want to get you one more question if I can. Speaker Johnson will have a probably big impact on the state of Louisiana, but especially for people north of I-10 like us up here in Shreveport. What do you think the impact would be?
It never hurts to have someone in such positions of power to understand your issues well. And so there's a lot of things that we could see in terms of economic development in North Louisiana that would be good. For example, the environmental left is trying to kill our fossil fuel energy industry. Haynesville Shale has really contributed to a lot of jobs and a lot of wealth in North Louisiana. There's some problems, okay? There's always problems with something, but having somebody understanding the importance of natural gas production in the United States is important. The speaker will understand that to the T. Northwest Louisiana, their economy is evolving to include more cyber activity. There's, kind of ways that a speaker can influence where those cyber activity funds are put from the federal government. Barksdale and Fort Pope, Fort Johnson, part of Mike's district. He understands the importance of both bases to the defense of our country. Doesn't hurt to have a speaker who knows the importance of those. I can keep going. That's a nice start.
Senator Cassidy, thanks so much. We appreciate it.
Hey, thanks, Stephen. I appreciate it.